This season, I've been talking about how to write poetry, but so far, none of the authors that I've gotten to interview have been poets until now. I connected with this month's guest author through Instagram, and I knew this would be the perfect opportunity to jump back into a standard episode. So please join me in welcoming indie writer Nerd the Poet. Hey, Dominic, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Hey, how's it going, Garrett?
It is going. So tell me about your work and what it is that you write.
Right, so I am a three-time published author from Los Angeles, California, currently living in Washington, D.C. And my poetry is, in a sense, lyric poetry. Sometimes I do other forms, prose, free verse, but mainly my poetry is what I like to call lifestyle poetry. I talk about my life, things that I've experienced, my interactions with others, but things that are very thought provoking and introspective.
How'd you get into doing poetry? A lot of writers talk about being influenced by um, a particular book or a particular author. What got you into doing poetry?
So a unique thing about myself is that I actually started off MCing. I started off writing rhymes, and how I would write is I would have a certain rhythm in my head, and then I will find the music that matches, that rhythm.
Hmm.
Then I started to be exposed to poetry when I was attending California State University, Long Beach, getting my degree in English creative writing. And I noticed that there were some similarities uh, to what it is that I was doing. So I said, okay, well, let me try to accustom my style to these forms. And it was a lot of transferable skills there. I like to push and challenge myself with things that I feel like I'm capable of doing, but I just haven't really gotten into. As far as the spoken word piece, listen to a lot of hip hop albums, such as from the Roots or Talib Kweli, Common. Some of those MCs were poets also, and they either did poetry on their albums or had poets of the early 2000s on there. And I took a real interest to that. And there's a form of rap without a beat called a cappella, right? So I kind of was like, okay, well, this is kind of like the a cappella form, like lyrics that kind of stand on their own, don't need choruses, don't need repetitive, verses and hooks and things like that. So the summation of all those things kind of led me towards pursuing poetry on a professional level.
That's really cool. That is really cool. But are there any other published poets or authors out there that particularly speak to you as a writer?
Yeah, so I like a lot of James Baldwin. I like a lot of County Cullen, Langston Hughes.
Hmm.
Currently, Javon Johnson, Rudy Francisco. Those would probably be the main ones. Tupac is my main influence, and he actually does have a published body of work. Um, but those are the artists and poets that I currently am listening to and inspired by.
What has been one of the biggest challenges or one of the biggest obstacles that you've dealt with the writing or the publication or any of those elements?
I would say the biggest challenge has been it's between promotion and editing.
Hmm.
Um, finding a good editor is difficult because you don't want someone who edits too well, and then you kind of lose the strength of your work. And it was interesting when I was getting my current book published through a small publisher, Day Eight. I was going back and forth with the editor, and it was like, "You said this. Did you mean this?" And I was like, "No, that's what I meant." And they was like, "But it sounds like so on and so forth." And I was like, "Okay." I had to wrestle with myself and think about where do I want this work to reach out, like how far do I want it to reach out versus how authentic do I want it to be? And I think that's a decision that we have to make as writers. Uh, do we want to have that impact to where a large amount of people can pick this up, or do we want to just be, household names and good to, a selective audience?
Is there a particular topic that you tend to discuss more in your poetry?
I tend to talk about love and relationships. So in my first book, The Love Song of D. Nerd McDonald, which was about my experiences with like kind of college age, interactions and situationships that I had. Uh, that's what I felt the more emotional and strong about. So that's kind of where I started. And I was actually inspired by T.S. Eliot poem called "The Love Song J. Alfred Prufrock," and I think everybody can understand heartbreak. Everybody can understand infatuation. Everybody can understand emotional betrayal. So those are the things that I like to talk about the most. And then I get into, social justice. I get into nature. I think I'm actually also getting into that now more as I'm maturing. So, like, I kind of understand a Robert Frost poem a little bit more now than I used to when I was in my 20s.
So, if you were to give any advice to other would-be authors, especially those who are looking at becoming poets, what advice would you give them?
I would say prepare yourself to share yourself. It's so interesting. Writers can be so introverted, but have these perspectives that are necessary, and I would say maybe even world changing, definitely perspective changing. And so people want to know what led you to those thoughts, what observations did you have, what things did you go through and experience. And if you're not able to talk about them, that's kind of doing a disservice. Now, unless you're using a pseudonym and just want to have stuff out there and have people guess or have representation, like that's another thing as well. But I would say prepare yourself to talk about what it is that you are doing, and then for your work to be critiqued and edited and chopped down. And I find that's a hurdle with a lot of uh, writers. And what is interesting about the transition of me going from a hip hop artist to writing is that that's what we lead with. Like, we lead with talking about ourselves. We lead with uh, just that expression and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting to see how that could be a challenge. And also, you're gonna have to invest in yourself. If you're self-publishing, there's a certain amount of money that you're gonna have to put in. It's not a lot. It's not a ridiculous amount, but it is an investment. Even if it's not just getting the print copies of the book, it's uh, getting book covers, and
Yeah.
sometimes you might have to get that digitally drafted by someone. Also, the promotion, and there's a lot of paid advertised things going on right now because unfortunately these social media platforms aren't giving you they're not giving you 100% access to your following. Not a lot of people know that either. So you're gonna have to take advantage of these Facebook ads and Instagram ads, especially if you aren't comfortable with talking about yourself a lot. So
So, Dominic, we're coming up on time here, but how can people get a hold of your work? How can they connect with you through social media? And what's the best way for them to get copies of your books into their hands?
right. So I have an All My Links, which is allmylinks.com/nerd the poet. You can also find me on Facebook at Dominic Nerd McDonald. I have one book through Day 8 Publishing. I'd rather be called a nerd. Two are one is on Amazon, and the other one is on Lulu.com. And I have to say the name of the online publisher because I get more money if it's by them and not through Amazon. But
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome, Dominic. Thank you very much for being on the show. It has been my pleasure to be able to have this conversation with you.
yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Now, if you're interested in picking up copies of Nerd the Poet's work or connect with him on social media, you can find those links down in the video description.